Meaning a record rise in living standards. But the Bank of England has cut its growth forecast for this year from 2.9% to 2.5%. Labour's Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Rachel Reeves joins me now. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
Well, unemployment is down again to a 7-year low and average earnings up to 1.9%, the highest rise in living standards since 2010. It's not a bad picture, is it?
It's obviously welcome news that unemployment is falling and that pay is finally picking up. The one area where I do think this government do need to focus more is on youth unemployment, and we saw an increase, a small increase, but an increase in youth unemployment in these numbers, and we already know that you're 3 times more likely to be unemployed if you are a young person compared with the rest of the population. So there's much more work to do to ensure that when young people leave school, college and university, there are jobs for them to go to, that they've got the skills to be able to take those jobs. And so I would urge the government to do more to boost our skills levels, to boost the number of apprenticeships and ensure that all young people leave education and go into jobs, not go onto the dole.
Obviously, it's very significant for anybody coming out of school or university not being able to get a job, but it sounds in the overall picture like a relatively minor quibble from you when you're looking at the government's record on the economy. It sounds like you're saying that overall, yes, it is a good picture.
Well, the numbers are certainly improved today, but I wouldn't say that unemployment of 16% amongst young people is a minor quibble. It is a big issue that the government needs to tackle, and there are things that government could do around apprenticeships, around vocational education and careers advice in schools, about ensuring that everybody who can go to university is not put off by high university tuition fees, ensuring there are routes for young people who aren't going to go to university so that they can make the most of their lives, and also making sure that jobs are of good quality with good prospects for young people and for everybody else for that matter, so that people can see a career for themselves and that they can make progress. And there are still too many jobs that aren't paying wages that people can live on and not giving the people the security that a job should bring with it.
I mean, what I'm sort of picking up from you is a bit of a reframing of the narrative. The narrative in the run-up to the election was talking about 0 hours contract, it was talking about living standards. It was saying that the government was getting it wrong on the big economic picture and on the sort of jobs that were being created. It sounds like you're finessing that view. Is that the case, and is it because of what happened in the election and the fact that the electorate have spoke in a way that effectively rejected Labour and supported the Tories more so than they had even at the last election when they didn't have that record behind them?
Well, the electorate clearly spoke last week, but some of the challenges that we still face as a country around the cost of living, around insecurity at work, around low pay in our economy still exist. And those problems are no less today than they were this time a week ago. We still have a situation where 1 in 5 workers are paid less than a living wage. There are 1.8 million zero-hour contracts in the economy. We will continue to call that out, but we will also speak to people on middle incomes, on modest incomes, who are hoping that their pay will keep pace with the rising cost of living in this Parliament in a way that it didn't in the last. And there are also many young people and their parents who are worried about the next generation, and will continue to speak out for good quality jobs, for apprenticeships, for skills, to ensure that as our economy recovers, it's not just a privileged few who benefit, but everybody on society, those on middle incomes, those on modest incomes, and those who are entering work, hoping to enter work for the first time. And that will be our role as the opposition in the next 5 years.
And on Labour's economic policy, some of the criticism from within the party itself is that there was a failure to understand the importance of aspiration and ambition. The party didn't speak to working voters and didn't convince small business either. I mean, Alistair Darling has been one of the harshest critics in saying there was no economic policy. Do you take all of those criticisms on board, and do you think it is important to pay more attention to aspiration and to convincing small business that Labour is on their side?
Well, the election was just 6 days ago, and of course there are important lessons for Labour to learn from that election. But for anybody to say 6 days after the election that we fought so hard to win, and where we thought we had good prospects of winning, to say that we have all the answers, I think would be foolish, and we need to take a long, hard look at ourselves, at our policies, about the way that we communicated with the electorate, to ensure that in 5 years' time we have a very different result and we see a Labour government again, because people on modest incomes who have struggled with the rising cost of living, people who rely on public services, the NHS and our schools. They still need a Labour government, and they still need people to speak for them. And we have an important role in opposition to hold this government to account, but we also have an important role as the Labour Party to look at where we went wrong, to look at why we couldn't build that broader coalition to win the last election, so we can learn those lessons so that we go on to win again in 2020. And I'm confident that we can do that.
I mean, your name has been put forward as a potential leadership candidate. I'm not asking you specifically for policies, but the general trajectory of the Labour Party now going forward on economic policy and other areas too. Does it need to go harder to the left or more to the centre ground?
We need to be in the centre ground in politics to win a general election. I don't think that anyone can claim that after being defeated in a general election by a party to the right of us, that the right approach would be to go to the left. We need to occupy the centre ground. Ed Miliband did a huge amount of work in the last 5 years to restore our credibility in a number of areas, but of course there is more work to do, and that work will go on, and we will refine our message, but you know, we only lost the election 6 days ago, and I campaigned on the Labour manifesto at the last election. I worked incredibly hard to secure victory at the last election, and 6 days later I'm not going to claim that I have all the answers, but we will learn the lessons, we will reach out, talk to people, understand where we went wrong, and rebuild and come back in 2020.
And just very briefly, are you ruling yourself out of the leadership contest, or are you still considering it?
I've already ruled myself out of the leadership contest, and like other Labour Party members and supporters, I'm considering who to back at this election. But we need somebody who can keep the party united, who can take that fight to the Tories and stand up for ordinary working people who have had a tough time in the last 5 years, but they weren't, I'm afraid, convinced at this election that Labour had all the answers. We need to do more to reassure and to connect with people if we want to rebuild that support and trust and increase the number of members of Parliament and form a Labour government again. But I'm confident that we can do that in the next 5 years, and I'm looking forward over the next 5 years of taking that fight to the Tories, but also taking our message to the country and securing a Labour government again.
Rachel Reeves, thank you very much for joining us.
She joins us live from Westminster. These are great figures, aren't they, Rachel? Rachel Reeves, they bear out the coalition and now the Conservatives' strategy on jobs.
Well, it is encouraging that unemployment is falling and that wages are finally picking up. I think the one area where the government really do need to give their full attention is the area of youth unemployment. And youth unemployment rose slightly in the last quarter, and you're 3 times more likely to be unemployed if you're a young person compared with the rest of the population. So my advice to the government, if they want to listen, would be to really focus on that in the months and years ahead, because we do need to ensure that as young people leave school, college and university, they have jobs to go to and they can make something of their lives with good careers. And so boosting the number of apprenticeships, ensuring that all young people who have the grades can get apprenticeships or go to university, to ensure that young people are getting the vocational education and the careers advice at school and college so they can progress into work and not go on the dole queue. I think that's really important.
Of course that's important, nobody would dispute that, but some say being a little churlish on every other element, on every other measure, it has improved.
I don't think it's being churlish saying that we need to do more to help young people. I think that is really important, and I do of course welcome the fact that pay is finally going up at a faster rate than inflation, and that more jobs are being created. That's got to be welcome, but the focus now should be making sure that as the economy recovers, that everybody benefits from that, and that includes young people, because it would be not in the interests of our country, and certainly not in the interests of young people, to let their skills and talents go unused and unleashed. And so that should be the priority really of the government in the months and years ahead.
Also in the news today, Labour's Executive Committee is going to outline later how it's going to elect a new leader. What kind of time frame do you think the new leader should be elected under?
Well, I think that the party need time to reflect on our loss last week. We lost and we lost badly, and we need time to consider not just the new leadership, but the direction of the party in the next 5 years. I am convinced that Labour can win the election in 2020 if we reconnect and rebuild across the country, in England and Wales and in Scotland as well. But that will take time to understand the scale of our defeat and where we went wrong.
So do you
6
think you
days
should wait,
after the election.
So do you think we should wait until September or till the party conference to decide on a new leader, or would you like to see it banged out by July?
I think we need a little bit longer than just a few weeks to decide the next leader of the Labour Party. We have fixed-term parliaments now, so we know the next election won't be until 2020. So let's make the time to get this decision right and have as many people participate in this process as we can.
Would you like to run?
No, I've already ruled myself out from the leadership contest, but like other Labour Party members and supporters, I'll be thinking in the days and weeks ahead about the direction of the party, and I want to be a big part of that, but I'm not running for leader.
Are you happy to say who you'd run behind, Chuka or Liz? They've both thrown their hats in the ring so far.
Well, we're only 6 days after the election defeat, and I don't yet have a firm view about who the leader should be. I think we need to all take time to reflect and understand what went wrong so that we can put it right, so that we are on track to win the next election in 5 years' time.
OK, Rachel Reeves, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Still to come on Sky News.